Good evening, everyone. Bonsoir à tous. Mon nom est Émilie Rotaillot. Je suis conservatrice publique au CCA. So my name is Émilie Rotaillot. I am curator public at CCA. Je voudrais commencer cet événement en reconnaissant que les peuples autochtones Ganingehaga, de Ganawage, Ganasadage, Aguasasne ont des connexions de longue date avec Tiohtià:ke, Munyang, Montréal. Leurs ancêtres, tout comme ceux des communautés Wendat, Anishinaabe, Abenaki, vivaient sur ces terres bien avant l'arrivée des colons. Aujourd'hui encore, l'île abrite de nombreuses personnes issues des Premières Nations, Inuits et peuples métis. Ces communautés continuent de subir la remise en cause de leurs droits et l'érosion de leur territoire traditionnel, provoquée par les mécanismes de colonialisme d'implantation, système qui persiste encore de nos jours. Le CCA étant établi sur des territoires qui n'ont jamais été cédés par leur population autochtone, nous reconnaissons donc les racines coloniales de notre institution et nous nous engageons à favoriser des relations inclusives et positives avec les nations autochtones de Tiohtià:ke, Munyang, Montréal et d'ailleurs. Our commitment includes programs, scholarships, research and collaborations to create a living land acknowledgement that will provide long-term support and resources for indigenous communities and researchers. Ce soir, je suis très heureuse de vous accueillir ici à l'occasion donc de l'ouverture, le vernissage de notre exposition à travers l'île et d'un projet à plus long terme sur le terrain, Groundwork, qui a été commissarié par Francesco Garutti et qui présente donc pour aujourd'hui, à travers l'île, cette exposition, une série de projets d'intervention de l'architecte Tiantian, des interventions et des projets qui sont en cours sur l'île de Meizhou en Chine. Donc nous célébrons aussi donc, le début d'un plus large projet qui s'appelle Sur le terrain, Groundwork. Et donc il s'agit d'un projet qui comprendra 3 expositions, des films, des articles en ligne, des programmes publics et qui s'intéresse aux projets alternatifs et aux recherches sur le terrain menées par des architectes en réponse aux crises sociales, environnementales qui touchent notre environnement bâti et naturel aujourd'hui. Donc pour démarrer cette série, nous avons l'immense plaisir ce soir donc, de recevoir Tiantian, qui va nous présenter donc, dans quelques instants son travail et son engagement aussi envers la revitalisation des régions rurales en Chine, ainsi que le projet en cours qu'elle présente ici dans nos salles. Avant de lui passer la parole, je voudrais également inviter à me rejoindre Francesco Garutti, qui est directeur associé donc programme au CCA et le commissaire de l'exposition. Il va venir nous présenter brièvement aussi sa vision du projet et le développement aussi dans les mois à venir. Après la présentation de Tiantian, elle sera rejointe, c'est pour ça qu'on a ces chaises, par Francesco pour une discussion sur la réalisation du projet sur l'île de Meizhou et sur l'exposition et le film. À la fin de leurs échanges, vous serez invités aussi si vous souhaitez poser des questions en français en anglais. Just to quickly say it in English, so Francesco Garutti, Associate Director at the CCA and Curator of the exhibition Into the Island and the project Groundwork, will introduce the projects. Afterwards, Tiantian will present her work on rural China. And at the end of her presentation, Francesco will join her on stage to discuss the Meizhou Island project, the exhibition, and the film. At which point, we also invite you all to ask questions in English or in French. Les présentations auront lieu en anglais. Elles sont filmées, elles seront ensuite mises en ligne sur notre site internet que je vous invite à consulter régulièrement pour en savoir plus aussi sur les expositions puis sur les programmes à venir. Now, I'm very glad to invite Francesco on stage. Thanks.
Merci, Émilie. Bonsoir, good evening, bonsoir à toutes et à tous. Je suis très heureux de vous introduire ce soir à travers l'île le premier chapitre de la série expérimentale sur le terrain. Et j'aimerais commencer par remercier tous ceux qui ont travaillé sur la conception et la réalisation de ces projets. Toutes les équipes de conservation, de numérique, de production et du design de l'exposition de CCA. Annette Lux et Lina Grum, les graphistes de l'exposition, Joshua Frank, le réalisateur de la série de films et son équipe. Merci à Giovanna Borasi, qui a cru en ce projet dans les débuts, et à Madame Lambert pour avoir fondé une institution toujours tournée vers l'expérimentation d'une nouvelle forme de recherche. Et bien sûr, à Tiantian, qui est la protagoniste de ce premier épisode de la série. And then I will switch to English. At the CCA, we always start a project with a question. So we asked ourselves, how do we really understand the making of architecture in the age of the ecological crisis? The question is, of course, broad and challenging to answer, but implies several other reflections and considerations. We know we are living in an age of really speculative systems designed to favor profit over people. We're living in a moment in which the capacity of the architect to be a real agent shaping space is more and more swallowed up by the dominant logic of neoliberal urbanism and its suffocating speculative rules. Social crises are undermining the most basic condition of living, while ecological collapses threaten the existence of a multiplicity of human and non-human beings across territories and geographies. So, questions whether to build or not to build, how to intervene in our land, and what to do with existing building stocks are at the core of the architectural thoughts today. What's the role of the architect in the age of the ecological crisis? In the last 10 years, I can consider as a kind of a referential kind of a moment the stipulation of the Paris Agreement in 2015 within the context of the United Nations Climate Change Conference. Conspicuous number of exhibitions, biennials, curatorial projects tackling issues directly connected with climate change, the values of climate justice have been populating the space of architectural institutions across the world. And we can say that the world of architecture is somehow united to face, raise awareness, and trigger a debate about one of the most problematic issues of our time. And it's working to make it a public concern. At the CCA, guided by the urgency to understand the structural and fundamental ways that architects are actually adopting to enact change in the built environment, we decided to shift our approach, simply to try to better understand. With the Groundwork series, instead of reporting on the result of projects, we decided to try to document design during its nascent stage. Groundwork deliberately observes when ideas, rather than buildings, take shape. It seeks to witness conceptual responses to context and conditions, political and economic constraints, but also cultural and geographical transformations. So somehow detours, failures, tactical shifts are becoming revelatory moments to understand new modes of practice and critical ways of engaging with given sites and communities. What we are trying to do with Groundwork is not a report of what has happened already, but actually the desire of narrating a series of stories about thinking processes and potential idea taking shape now. To address these key structural questions, we decided to engage in dialogue with three practices active in the very diverse context in the world. We're developing methodological approaches that aim to question, subvert, and somehow redefine what it means to make space today. The first chapter of the story, which we know we are opening tonight, follows Xu Tiantian to Meizhou Island off the coast of China, where she's creating a sort of set of subtle intervention to mediate between pressures of heritage, tourism, and marine ecology. The second chapter will open in the fall and will focus on the collective and group of collectives and architects and activists of B+ in Berlin, as they launch a European citizen initiative intended to shift culture and legislation toward preservation and rehabilitation of existing buildings, offering a way to actively really fight forms of inequitable urban speculation. And then the third chapter, the final one, will bring us next spring in Brazil with Carla Wasaba to the earth of Minas Gerais, where Carla is developing a set of light pavilions in a coffee field. I would describe them as a minimal support structure in a territory where collectives are resisting, strong extractive industrial agriculture. As you probably know, at the CCA, throughout more than 20 years of practices, research, exhibitions, and projects, we have been concerned about architecture's complicated relationship with the environment. With this project, we try to somehow reverse the methodological approach we were used to apply, and we decide to meet the architect directly on the ground. So this is an image of Shu Tiantian, and actually it was the first visit that, for us, for the team of the CCA, we were on the Madeleine site in Meizhou Island. The road that you see in front of us is entirely done with, oyster shells, and this is a low tide condition on the east of the island. Here we are in the Zurich hotel rooms with Olaf Grevert, one of the actually partners of B+, during a kind of important meeting, Zoom meeting he's having with political scientist Lina Kohler and then Arno Brandhuber to discuss the development of the campaign. And this is a photograph taken by Carla Wasaba actually some weeks ago in Minas Gerais, where the first testing and kind of extraction of soil samples are conducted to activate the first assessment on the ground. So to be able to follow in the best way the phases through which an idea is taking shape, we decide to use cinema as one of the essential operative tools to understand the flow of thoughts and the ongoing relationship between what an author is doing and the site. Joshua Frank, who is here with us, a journalist and filmmaker based between Montreal, New York, and Beijing, has started working with us, since the beginning, documenting encounters, meetings, working sessions, site visit with 3 offices to assemble 3 very different stories of 3 very different ways of rethinking architecture making today. In the CCA galleries tonight, so you will encounter a film shot across October and November last year, 2023, documenting the encounters, the visit, the research conducted by Shu Tiantian to progress the project in Meizhou Island, but also artifacts, documents, specimens, and site fragments as evidences of an ongoing thinking process focused on the relationship with communities, reactivating rural and biological systems, and using architecture as a practice of repair and care. Tiantian will tell us more about the story in a second. So I think it's a moment to introduce the protagonist of the night. I will just mention a few words about you, Tiantian. So Shu Tiantian is the founding principal of DNA Design and Architecture, and she's professor in practice at Tsinghua University School of Architecture. She received her baccalaureate in architecture from Tsinghua University in China and a master's degree in architecture urban design from Harvard GSD. Shu Tiantian has engaged extensively in revitalizing processes in rural China, and her holistic approach she's been selected by UN, with several kind of a project as case study for inspiring practices on urban-rural linkages. She received numerous awards, including a 2022 Swiss Architecture Award, the 2023 Berlin Art Prize, and then the 2023 Marcus Art Prize. And then in 2023, she kind of got the Global Award for Sustainable Architecture by the UNESCO. Her work has been exhibited at Museum of Modern Art New York, Cité de l'Architecture du Patrimoine in Paris, Edes Architecture Forum in Berlin, and recently Arc-en-Rêve in Bordeaux. In 2020, Xu Tiantian was appointed an honorary fellow of the American Institute of Architects. Thank you, and please join me welcoming on stage Xu Tiantian.
Thank you so much. It's really my great honor to be part of this experimental project of CCA. And it was also a lot of fun and pleasure to work together with Francesco, Irene, and George, and your crew members, and everybody from CCA. And I also want to thank everybody for coming to this talk, this lecture today, and to listen to our story coming from rural side of China. DNA is our office, but I guess we all share the same values, that we believe in the capacity, the potential, the strength of design and architecture. So I want to start by introducing, this is a picture of Shanghai. As you know, like in the past decades, what you heard about China is maybe mostly about the development, economic and social development in the metropolitan city, with the urbanization and the modernization process. But what is unknown or forgotten is that in less than half century ago, we were still an agricultural country, and even by now we still have half population living in the rural region. But if you explore further among these rural, remote rural regions, there's still very rich culture, tradition, history, together with the agrarian society and agricultural activities. So I start from the very beginning, over 10 years ago, when we first invited to the county of Songyang, which is a typical agricultural county with 50,000 population in the county urban center and 190,000 population living around over thousands of small ancient villages in the region. So 10 years ago, when we first arrived, like the other rural region in China, this county was really facing these issues among the rural villages when young people moved away to city for better employment. And many of the villages become, we call it hollow village with low population. So we started with this collaboration with the local community and local administrations, the county government, by adapting a pedagogy we call it architecture acupuncture. So to introduce a public program, a small-scale public program to each local villages, according and tailored to the local context and heritage. And to serve the village and community, and also to formulate a local regional circulation between villages and a county urban center. And the 8 years collaboration ended up with over 2 dozen of small-scale projects, design interventions, and different locations. And the first village project started in Tiantian. It was just by a random visit that when we arrived and asked by the local village community for professional opinions on whether they should demolish the cluster of buildings at the entrance of the village. At that time, these buildings were abandoned for years and also having these safety issues. But we consider that this cluster to be the very important fabric of the original villagers arriving on this site, on this location, and build up the houses. And even they're in poor conditions, architectural qualities, but they still represents the original fabric of this ancient historical village. So we made the proposal to preserve this cluster without touching on the exterior, because of the regulation of this traditional village. By only reorganize the interior program and open up the space to accommodate for community programs and also potentially for other programs. And we presented this proposal to the local county government as a pro bono design project, and to request the county government to sponsor the funding for renovation of this cluster for the village community. So this actually really become the beginning of how we started this collaboration in this county for 8 years long. And the project, of course, was constructed by the local villagers, and the interior space could be reused for different programs like exhibition or artist studio. Actually, the space after the renovation, the space inspired two young artists returning home from Hangzhou city and set up their studio, fabric studio, and which also brings new program, cultural, educational program. And these young artists also help the local villagers work with the handcrafts and also to sell them on the internet. So this really becomes a new transformation for this ancient village. When we first arrived, there was only less than 20 elders living in this village, and after a few years, the population, the inhabitants the number of inhabitants has grown to over 200 in the past years. So this really becomes a starting point of a systematic collaboration we propose to the local county government by adapting this architectural acupuncture. So we have been working with this Hakka village with the Indenture Museum, which is basically it's a Hakka ecosystem for the Hakka community. And Hakka means guest families. They moved over here and settled down and documented everything, every activities, every commercial activities or community activities on paper. So that becomes Indenture a very important archive. Actually, this is the largest Hakka indenture collection in China. So a new Hakka indenture museum is built, but also become the opportunity to revive the lost masonry building technique in the region. And it's also a meeting point for just an open pavilion for the villagers and the visitors. And we also worked with infrastructure, abandoned infrastructure, like this abandoned bridge was about to be demolished, but we proposed for a new canopy attached to existing structure, which can become a new meeting space or common space, which is also referring to the local traditional lounge bridge. It's a bridge as an infrastructure, but also as the important meeting space for the local communities in the ancient time. So this bridge can be turned into a pedestrian walkway and just open space for any flexible functions initiated by the local people, local community, and also a symbol of reunion of these two villages across the river. And eventually we come up with this, working 8 years in this region, we also become the locals. So whenever we come to a new village, when we were invited by a new village, we always ask them about what is the special resource here, or what kind of construction, typical construction material or method you would use in your village. And so On one hand, we were working with anything that's convenient, local, but it's also a strategy to engage the local community, local builders in the whole process, in the entire process of formulating the program, the building, the design of the building. So and we can also work with the natural element like the live bamboo, which was very a fun process to work with local bamboo builders, and a space similar to the ancient time, a space in the nature. So this bamboo theater can become a open space in the nature, or a theater in the nature that you can reserve for the local traditional opera performance. We also consider this is, even though it's not a building, but for us it's a architecture, it's a metabolic architecture that can be easily maintained and easily accessible for the public. And working in rural, of course, inevitably you will encounter with agriculture. This is actually really the important part of our rural engagement. Actually, we started with this Xing village. When we first arrived, we were introduced by the local villagers. They were really proud of their brown sugar production, which is very well known, but at the time it was also facing crisis. The cooking happening in the family workshops, basically in the family kitchens, would cause a lot of issues like fire risks or the hygiene issues. And it was actually conducted by the family workshops as individual. This production couldn't really catch up with couldn't really perform well in the market economy. So after discussion with the county government, the agricultural department, cultural department, and also with the village community and the sugar masters, who are the most skilled chef. So we come up with this brown sugar factory in the village as a new facility to upgrade the production conditions, which also improved the sugar price in the past years. And the price has been increased 5 times, which really inspired the young villagers returning home to join its production. So the architecture, it becomes also a central stage to showcase this cooking process, which we consider this is also a contemporary theater, for these motions, activities, this movement by these cooking masters. They really become the actors on stage. And actually they become the celebrity in the region, because they were the space really attracted many visitors during the cooking season. And it's running 24 hours during the day. So the space is conceived as a stage setting. During the non-production season, the space can also be used as a village community space, or just for any cultural leisure activities. And a different village in Caizhai is known for the best tofu in the region. So in this case, a new tofu factory is introduced at the entrance of the village, as functioning as a common kitchen. So all the family workshops can cook together, produce the tofu at the same time with open corridor to visitors, to showcase this production of tofu as intangible heritage, and also the buildings as a factory, just like the brown sugar. It's a factory, but it's also functioning as a live museum. For the both projects, actually, through this factory, a new village union is established to integrate all these family workshops into a villager union, so they become the operator and also the shareholder of this new collective business entity, which would perform better in the market economy compared to the individual households. And as a collective entity, is also to preserve the future business or economic potential for this special local agricultural production. So both projects actually give us the idea of working with the production space, but the production facility, it also carries the value of cultural and social aspects, not only for the economic value. It's always the intangible heritage of each village. So in a way, this new factory becomes actually the entity to restore the village identity. At the same time, also with this new collective economic entity, and also the better income, the increased revenue, young villagers return home to join this production union. So in general, I think in total, before the COVID, in the entire county of Songyang, we had over 6,000 people returning to this region, which was a significant number. And on another project with the tea plantation, tea production, we also wanted to together, similar to the other productions, to add in the extra layer, extra program, a social program or a cultural program to existing production program. So the space or the building of production can also become a cultural facility and a live museum. And with this tea production, we also wanted to explore more on the cultural side or on the history, how the building can send the message of the agricultural history. So we dig further with this. The agricultural calendar in China in the ancient time was every year there's 24 solar terms based on different seasons. And during the day, we only have 12 zodiac hours. It's really based on the different animals' activity patterns. And we also look into the summer solstice, which is, we have the longest day hours, and the sun reaches to the maximum altitude. And this is the day that is most celebrated in the world by different cultures and religions, and which is also a festival in China in the ancient agricultural calendar. So we wanted to take these elements and to integrate or to work together with the time dimension into a building, into a space. So during the summer solstice day, from sunrise to sunset, there are 7 hours, by 7 zodiac hours, from the rabbit to dragon, snake, horse, goat, monkey, rooster. I hope you can read the text, smaller text underneath, so you understand why this zodiac pattern is really based on the different species and the pattern and their patterns. So the building actually with the simple form, but also with the light tunnels coordinating with the sunlight angle of different zodiac hours. So this articulation brings, during the summer solstice time, brings the light into the space. So that's the light coming into the space from the sunrise to sunset, really going through different sunlight, the light tunnels as a sundial. So that's by noon, the horse hour, and it comes to the afternoon. So the space really becomes a sundial, and we wanted to take this as an interpretation of how the tea cultivation actually also becomes a culture, a symbol in our culture. And at the same time, also the volumes, as the light tunnels, as if the sunlight is frozen during the summer solstice time, become the monument. We just found that, really exploring into the agricultural past and history, but it's basically how people live on this place. People live in this village for many generations, for hundreds of years, and each village built up its own legacy, its own cultural history, heritage. And for us, coming as an architect, we realized that the building can definitely integrate with the heritage and local culture. So the building will have a program function. Of course, this is all discussed with the local, kind of a co-authorship with the local community. But will function really fitting or adding to the original fabric of each village. At the same time, can also become the inspiration for our design. And at the same time, design and architecture, can become our instrument or tool to really address to very local specific issues and to provide design as the solution. So then after Songyang, when we were invited by the neighbor Jingyun County, and with the research, after a research conducted together with the local administrations, we realized there was this issue, but that was considered as an issue in the beginning because the Jingyun, with its quarry heritage history of over 1,000 years, and most of the quarries were closed down before the millennium. So in this region, there were over 3,000 abandoned quarries, and really become a issue for the local administrations because of the safety issue, and also all these vacant spaces would become a waste of abandoned industry. So after the research and discussion, we actually wanted to work together with the experts, the quarry experts and geotechnical engineers to understand better of the situation. And then we specifically asked to make a proposal to look into these vacant spaces. So I want to start actually with a documentary that was taken before the quarries were closed down. And you would understand that these space were actually manually quarried by the local worker with the skill, this technique that was passed through generations in the past over 1,000 years. Well, on one hand, it's a technique heritage, but on the other hand, it's also very, very harsh working, very intense labor working, and very harsh work environment. And people living in this region made their living out of this quarry, this very intense quarry labor work. So when we first visited all these abandoned quarry space, we were definitely overwhelmed. really impressed by the space, but at the same time also to understand how local quarry workers were very passionate about their heritage.
大概最早的时候是70年代开始打的啊，70年代那个时候我们这里基本上都是打石头的，没有别的生活的，就是靠打石头过日子的啊。70年代、80年代、90年代，那30年代是全部都是搞石头的啊，别的没有事情做了。到90之后呢，有的就是不打石头了，别的是工作去了啊。所以以后呢，这个下面这个是要机械化了，要机器去了啊，不是人工打了。我就是讲这么句，我是16岁就打石头了。这个红街啊，那以前我们打石头是很苦了，早上6点钟就到这里的，到山上去了，到晚上6点钟，一天到晚，那个时候呢，饭都吃不饱，打石头是饭都吃不饱，一天打。
Not even the older quarry workers were very emotional about these quarry space, but also the local young villagers, understanding this this sentimental connection and also the quarrying as a local collective memory.
这些石窟呢，其实对于我们晋源人还蛮有意义的，因为在我的印象当中，就是我们爷爷那一辈有好多人都是以采石为生的，就在80、90那个年代。变化的话呢，第一就是作为我们在五 A 景区里面的话，它也是为缙云增添了一处新的观光旅游的一个胜地吧，然后会为我们当地的村民也带来一定的经济收入。对于我们来说的话，我觉得像咖啡厅啊，然后或者就是其实现在也蛮好的，像书吧、咖啡厅，或者就是传承我们当地的一个文化，叫物剧文化，就一些表演啊，其实对我们当地都是意义比较大的。
So we made this proposal by taking the existing abandoned quarry spaces and introduce a new program really tailored to each physical form and also different characteristics of each quarry. So this becomes a cluster of space that can provide cultural public program or leisure programs instead of making new buildings to accommodate all these public functions. And we were, of course, working with the geotechnical engineer to ensure the safety reinforcement. And just within 6 months, 3 quarries were built with a new design intervention, with the first one as a showcase stage for the local quarry workers. It's really by their request. They wanted to still have a space for their to demonstrate their technique on quarrying, on this manual quarrying. And the second quarry becomes open theater for young villagers or for traditional opera performance. And the third quarry, taking the interior geometry, becomes a book mountain, address the local literati spirit and calligraphy history. So I think for the quarry project, it was more to try to understand, the local collective memory and take this existing space as quarry abandoned space as existing structure, existing architecture. So to reuse the space instead of making new buildings on quarry as a topography. And on the other hand, it's also not only to appreciate, the beauty, the sensation of this space, but rather to understand the struggle of, of local people and what they believe in or what they hope for. And for us, these quarry were really also the monumental architecture built by local quarry workers as anonymous collective. And architect joining in this process as the facilitator to contribute and also to transform these already existing monument into something can be accessible for the public and also can connect back with the collective memory belonging to the communities. And we also take this architecture and design, again, this method of taking the design as an instrument to look into vernacular buildings, vernacular typology. Fujian Tulou is very special, very unique vernacular typology in south part of Fujian province, which is my home province. And there 46 Tulou buildings were listed by UNESCO as World Cultural Heritage, and there are still thousands of Tulou buildings in the region. And since Tulou was originally built as both defense structure and to accommodate collective living, and this is the only typology, vernacular typology, that is without hierarchy, because every family will have, this is about even distribution on the units, on the families. And I think it was since 3 decades, it's been for decades that with the economic development that Tulou eventually losing the original functionalities. So many people moved out of the Tulou building, and thousands of Tulou actually become vacant or abandoned. So that's really the current condition. We encountered Tulou with just a visit to the region, and then we realized this is a urgent social architectural issue that could be fixed with the design as a solution. So we made a proposal to the local authorities, and again, just saying that a design to look into different ruins, but ruin can really become the new typology. The problem with all these Tulou as heritage buildings is that with the preservation policy, you have to rebuild everything. So the local government wouldn't have the enough funding to rebuild thousands of Tulou buildings. But if we take the ruin as a new typology, then we can collaborate with the local community by looking into taking the current condition as the starting point. So each Tulou, you don't need to rebuild, but really introduce a new program according to the village history or the context, and to take the ruin as a courtyard or a new garden or lookout terrace. So with this new cultural or public program, these Tulou buildings can still become a community center to preserve the collective memory. And even the ruin, you can change the perspective of seeing the ruin become the merging process. In the past decades, when Tulou was become vacant, so it becomes the transformation of this building, this Tulou as the ecological building merging with the nature, and the trees become the new inhabitants. So in that sense, with much more practical and economic solution, this design strategy can reuse the Tulou and as a public cultural space or facility. And we want to argue that this vernacular typology can still be performative in our contemporary context, with design and architecture providing the solutions. So now we arrive at the Meizhou Island. For the previous projects you've seen, they're always in the mountain region. So arriving in the Meizhou Island, this is an island belonging to my home city, which is a small island, but was also the birthplace of the Meizhou, the goddess of sea. Meizhou is the goddess of sea that is worshipped by the global Chinese community with the temples, Meizhou temples around the world. But the original temple really originated from this Meizhou Island. So if you arrived on this island, there's very, very overwhelming pilgrimage culture happening on this small island. But there are also 40,000 inhabitants still living on this island. So when we first invited by the authority, local government, or cultural department, actually they were hoping to build a new museum, iconic museum, because at that moment, when people arrive to this island, every year 3 million of visitors coming for the temple, for the pilgrimage, and in the summertime they come to the beach, maybe, or at most they will come to arrive at this reserve park at the south part of the island, without really interacting or visiting the local villages. There are still 11 villages on this island. So after working, this becomes a collaboration to introduce, 6, if you see the red dots, these are the 6 new locations. Instead of one iconic museum, we propose to have a cluster of design interventions, really to interact and integrate with the local communities. And also the program comes by, it's tailored to the production and the culture, all these local life activities happening on this island. I think you can also watch the movie to understand better about this process, that we were literally introduced or guided by the local fishermen to visit or to understand their production, like the kelp, fish cultivation, and also the oyster, alboni production. For example, for this design, we didn't really, have to make a building, but rather to integrate what was already existing, belonging to the life and production on this island, to integrate kelp and fish cultivation, and also provide a research-based platform for the young scientists or young researchers in the universities in the region. Through this discussion, communication, just asking local people about anything, they interesting or anything they belong to their daily life. So for us, it was really an exploration, a whole journey, really to look into to understand the daily life, the life routine on this island. And we also encounter with this small local people, how the island people reuse or filter the wastewater and collect rainwater. You see on this map, you can see the 4 small circular ponds, which was built in the ancient time. And on the island, there were over 2 dozen of these small ponds to filter the wastewater. So that becomes an initiative to build a filtration water plants by the gravity, filter through the water grass or lotus or these, and also its natural filtration system. So to reactivate for the adjacent vegetable farm. And the architecture becomes the extension of this infrastructure. At the same time, it's also the open leisure pavilion or educational space for local school children. And together with the vegetable farm, also with the melon shed, also becomes the architecture. We consider this as part of the architecture, and together with this wastewater treatment plant, this becomes a learning platform for visitors as well. So they have already started this plantation of vegetable. And when we walk around, we go around the island and we reach to this point. This is the mangrove plantation, which is to restore the local coastal ecology. And mangrove has been known for a very intelligent ecosystem, which also not only to restore the ecology, but also provide shelter for the biodiversity along the mudland. The project started by looking into an abandoned structure on the land, providing space for visitors, also for the researchers. And eventually we realized that on this land, on this side of the island, you don't really need to develop tourism, but rather to preserve the ecology. And so the design shift from making a building or renovating a building to renovate, actually to reuse this abandoned fish pond, which was closed down because of the mangrove plantation restoration. The fish pond was polluting of course, the nature, and was closed down and being abandoned for years. But now, after the plantation of mangrove, we consulted with our mangrove scientists and researched online, and they come up to a design that's only to renovate or to fix the broken parts of this fish pond by collecting, the stone pieces were just falling apart. So it was a very easy process to collect all these stone pieces and then rebuild this, to fix this fish pond and also the water gate. So the pond becomes a space to really become the shelter for biodiversity, for fish, for birds, crabs, and clams living on this mudland. And at the same time, we also introduce a new layer, just by very simple steps for the researchers. So this pond, this reuse of the fish pond can also become a research base for our researchers coming from the universities. For this project, instead of making building, we take this existing structure, but also the structure when it's working together with the high tide and the low tide on the mudland. It really reshape our thinking of what is architecture, because for our understanding, the high tide and low tide already create a space that is built up by the nature, by the ocean. So the fish pond will emerge, will really merge with when the water goes down, and also becomes the large scale of, you can really see the shifting of the water level here. And another discovery was the seaweed cultivation, which I thought was the most beautiful structure I've ever seen. It's really an ephemeral structure by bamboo. And how local fishermen cultivated these seaweed seeds with the oyster shell and soaking in the ocean water within this structure for 10 months during the year. So this inspired for a new program, taking this incubator, seaweed incubator, as the center of the space. So basically it's a production workshop, but then we can also add in a new cultural, educational, or leisure program facing the ocean, which also becomes, it's a workshop for the villagers, for the fishermen, but also can become a learning classroom for visitors. And the project is ongoing with, this is a mock-up for our stone walls, also to work together with the oyster shell. The mudland cultivation is not only with the seaweed, but also with the local oyster pillar, which opens up a new enormous ocean farming with the mudland. And everything's already existing on the site. So our intervention is only to introduce a passage based on existing cultivation system that is invented really by the local fishermen for hundreds of years. And a new walkway will introduce and will bring the public access to this ocean farm and take it as also an educational and knowledge learning platform. So again, with the high tide, it covers up the entire mudland. But when tide goes down, the space will really emerge and become the land that is accessible for public as a experience, a knowledge learning experience or exploration on this mudland. And the last one is going back with this loop, going back to the starting point next to the temple, where this is the location for the building, but actually it's really to look into the arrival harbor for the fishermen coming back home with their boats. And this is the harbor for all the fishermen, after their fishing, the boats will arrive home in this harbor, but also looking up to the temple and Meizhou, the statue, and collect their whatever they have fished during the day and take everything back home. And then the plaza becomes the intangible heritage space for any cultural or just celebration activities after work. And the design, again, is taking the cliff as existing structure, as existing architecture, and the building is just simply adding a new roof, but the cliff also becomes the space of architecture with the new roof, and then to welcome the fishermen returning home to this open plaza. I'm going to finish with two Chinese phrases. The first one is 锦上添花, which means similar to icing on the cake, adding flowers to embroiderment. So means extra additional decoration to something that is already good. Then architecture definitely can be 锦上添花. But we also believe that architecture can become, in a different way, 雪中送炭 means providing charcoal when it snows. So it's more about providing necessity in terms of urgency. And so we believe architecture can have more strength or influence or capacity when you take it as a tool or a means of 雪中送炭. So thank you very much.